first pop-up art show took place in New York 12 years ago. Fueled by social media, a pop-up is a cheap and fast alternative to traditional art exhibitions. Ours was 2 nights, December 5th and 6th, 2019, at the art studio and gallery of our friend Trip Denton. Us being JEJ. 3 very close friends who are taking the art world, if not by storm, at least by drizzle. As a few seconds from our manifesto will clearly demonstrate. Who are the watchdogs on the steps of the houses of art, raising high the enormous grappling irons of discernment? JEJ. I'm John Thornton, lapsed painter and current filmmaker, who concentrates on short documentaries about Philadelphia-connected artists. This movie is unusual for me in that I'm one of the artists in the show that I'm documenting. The 5 paintings I exhibited from the late 1990s are some of the last I did before switching to video. My twin brother is also exhibiting work. Jim's a prize-winning journalist who has blossomed into a highly imaginative, self-taught cartoonist.
Hi, I'm Jim Thornton, and I've made my living as a magazine writer since 1983. But I always liked drawing cartoons, and I think actually the first things I ever got published were little narrative cartoons.
JEJ began in 1952 with the birth of 2 fragile souls in Pittsburgh. A number of decades later, Jim went off to the University of Iowa Writers' Workshop, and I went to the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts and met the final piece of the JEJ puzzle, Edgar Gerrans. Edgar taught me how to paint. We became roommates and very close friends. When Jim came to visit, he too bonded with the young Nebraskan. Edgar now lives in New York and has been creating works of art that are astounding in their technical quality and emotional resonance.
Hello, my name is Edgar Gerrans. I began a series of large narrative drawings in 2001. In this show, there are 2 drawings. One is 2004, one is 2017.
The JEJ pop-up art show also featured the world premiere of an amazing animated film, The Square Root of Twins. It was produced and directed by Linda Kudzmas, my beloved cubicle wife for decades before the closing of the art school where we both taught.
Hi, I'm Linda Kudzmas. I wanted to be an animator since I was 4 years old. I wanted to marry Bugs Bunny when I was a little kid. I would read the credits at the end. The largest name was always the director. I didn't know what a director did or was, but I wanted to be that because they had the biggest name in the credits.
She is currently trying to get her film into festivals, so I can't show it to you. But here's the trailer with me as the voice talent. It's 1962, and my twin brother John and I are pupils at Sweetwater Prep, a private elementary school near Pittsburgh. The truth is that John and I are somewhat competitive twins. In hindsight, I acknowledge it's hard to believe what happens next really did, in fact, happen next. But it did. I swear it did.
Being a twin, we didn't want to compete. John and I would always divide the world into realms. If we had an interest, say, in biology, I got ichthyology and John got ornithology. John's always been really good at art. I was so impressed that he could paint himself and it actually looked like him. So there was never any competition in the fine art world.
The older drawing is of my cousin Norman and his 2 children. It's the closest I've come to any kind of political image. The 2 boys are shooting these replica almost guns that they got at Christmas time. It was 2004, so we were in Afghanistan and we had just invaded Iraq. I have a couple of different narratives that I'm working with. One was the nature of violence and how much of it is hardwired in us. Boys will always play war and cops and robbers and you're dead and you're in the jail and I got you. And if the parents don't buy them guns, they'll make guns out of sticks.
A week before Christmas in 1993, my wife Nancy and I attended a Christmas party in Center City. Walking back to our car, we were robbed at gunpoint. Before that incident, I'd been known for my brightly colored, quasi-cubistic still life paintings. My painting style changed abruptly. I began what I called my crime series, images of bad behavior in which I often appeared as the victim or the perpetrator, and sometimes both. Using myself in different roles like this was clearly related to my being an identical twin.
After writing for so long, and some of my editors were pretty nice, but some of them were just demanding and unappreciative, right brutal bastards.
You know, your shit is all over my place. And tomorrow morning I'm going to come in and I'm going to actually fucking cut your throat.
I got to where I just started to hate writing because over my shoulder I'd hear this critical voice. That's not right. Blah, blah, blah.
I guess I was trying to use dark humor to deal with the trauma of what Nancy and I had experienced. In 2003, at Jim's urging, I began taking Prozac, but this was well before that, and so I was often in a bad way.
The other idea I had was this father coming home, being opposed to the war and looking at his 11-year-old son, knowing that in 7 years, whether he likes it or not, his son could sign up for the military and be involved in one of these wars.
When I started doing this artwork, I resolved that I wasn't going to care at all about the quality. I was just going to do it for fun and the psychological distraction.
How long did the square root of twins take?
15 months. I design everything as a puppet. It's all segmented, almost like replacement animation, meaning that each mouth movement is different and I just replace it. The eyelids are separate, the irises are separate, the arms are 3 different pieces, the hand, the lower arm, and the upper arm, and then I have replacement hands that I would shuffle through. I would design those, scan them in, and then take them into Photoshop and give them paper cutout textures, and then bring it into After Effects, rig the puppets, and then animate them.
I stay pretty close to what's there. I change out all the lighting. I control the lighting very carefully to enhance my narrative. In the real windows, there was nothing, the neighbor's house, so I put the landscape up the hill that Norman grew up with. So it's this sweeping Nebraska cornfield in the winter. Kind of looks like water. It has almost a feeling of an ocean.
My role model was James Thurber, a wonderful writer. He also did these really great cartoons, but his drawing style looked like something that maybe I could do. And so I just started doing these little cartoons. I'd walk around with a notebook, and if I'd come up with a jokey idea, I'd write it down. And I remember one day I did like 90 cartoons, sadly lost to time. Facebook happened. I would post these joking around type things. The early ones were all a piece of paper and a pen, pretty simple, but I would always put words in and try to make it narratively entertaining. Then I got a phone that came with this little stylus. And so I started doing digital cartoons on my phone. I went into a Best Buy and the guy said, well, why don't you look at this iPad with an iPencil? And I could not believe how sensitive this pen was and how you could zoom in and do all this stuff. So John encouraged me to get it. And then this program, Procreate, it's amazing how if you just do stuff for fun, you slowly get a little better at it. YouTube has all these videos on how to draw stuff. If I can figure out how to draw hands and eyes that were pretty realistic, then the rest of the stuff could just be my poor man's James Thurber-y rendition, but it would still have a sense of being somewhat real.
I used myself, friends, and some of my students from the Art Institute as models. I painted from photographs and would place the carefully lit figures into different landscapes. In this one, I picture myself being chased at night by a faceless guy in a truck. In this picture, I lie in a fetal position of misery as a tough brute. The kindly artist Larry Francis walks by shirtless with a beer. Did Larry just beat me up? I will leave that to you to decide.
So the other drawing is the final drawing I did in Lindsborg, Kansas, of my immediate first cousins, Anita, David, and Dinah, and then Anita's children and Dinah's husband. And everything there was collapsing and fell apart, and actually a lot of the people have passed away. My cousin Anita suffers from bipolar illness and large addiction problems. She married someone else who was an addict. They had 3 children. The children were taken away by the state. They were in and out of foster care. They had very difficult lives, and Anita, of course, also had a very difficult life. The drugs didn't kill her, but she's still struggling with her mental illness. And that was a lot of what this picture is about.
This one is perhaps the most direct response to our armed robbery. But here I am the criminal, pulling a gun on the artists Perky Edgerton and Brian Munier. Curiously, Perky seems to be trying to protect her husband's groin. Sex can be problematic. Here I am trying to do something that I'd never do in real life, getting it on with a colleague from the Art Institute of Philadelphia. Our attempted tryst is on the grounds of George Washington's Mount Vernon estate. We are being interrupted by jeering tourists, and that throws me into a frenzy of rage and frustration. I happen to also be one of the people who is making fun of me. The shocked woman trying to protect the innocence of her young daughter is the artist Jennifer Baker. Her husband, Philadelphia Inquirer writer Stephen Salisbury, is the man with the tie and glasses. Their young daughter, spared the sight of this awfulness, recently graduated from medical school. There was a movie called American Beauty that this last one may remind you of. But I swear I did this long before the movie came out. Here I am, a balding middle-aged guy, pumping some 20-pound dumbbells to try to buff up for the local teenage girls.
When I first started doing it, these adult coloring books had become bestsellers because older, stressed adults seemed to find them therapeutic to just sit down and color. I thought this was the equivalent of adult coloring books, but that I would actually be doing the pictures as well as the coloring. John had always told me how soothing it was to lose yourself in art. I had had a little bit of that with writing, in the sense that when you're really concentrating on writing, you're not worried about the day-to-day preoccupations. And so it was good in the distraction point of view, but writing didn't have any recreational component. John always told me that painting, if you have to focus on it, you have to pay attention to it so other things leave your mind for a while. But making something with your hands, it's also kind of fun. Because a lot of the stuff has a narrative component, I oftentimes will put writing in with the actual images, and I found that that's my least favorite part of it. And I wait until I've done the image, and then I have to figure out how to stick the words without having them go over parts of the picture that I like. Anyhow, it's just been extremely fun and rewarding.
It was experimental in some ways in that there's less structure to the background. Some of the decisions that happen in the drawing happen because of the physical space. I don't normally draw from above, so I stood on a chair and then I got the figure I wanted, and it created a feeling of the figure floating almost, and that worked well for me. I have a lot of light coming in from the window, but I have a spotlight on the ground that lights her. I knew I wanted her on the couch, I wanted it to be daytime, and I wanted her to be in a drugged state, but not comfortable.
I was doing individual pictures. I'd come up with a concept and do that. I was starting to spend more and more time, maybe even a week or two, to finish doing something. Part of the reason I was doing it in such detail, I didn't want to have to come up with a new idea for the next one, so I thought I'd just work on this one. I decided I would tell tales from John and me. The first one was John, me, and Edgar when they were living at Mrs. Sprocket's rooming house for artists and cats. Ended up being a 157 panel novella about the adventures we had. It got increasingly made up, but it was all based on a true story, although the embellishments took over.
Every time I walked in the studio, I felt it failed. It was pretty different than a lot of the other work I was doing. And I kept redrawing and redrawing everything. It was a really tough image for me.
In school, John and I were made to read literature, but we wanted to read comic books. I thought I've always wanted to do a memoir of my life as a twin, but I just didn't feel like a written out memoir. The subject matter just wasn't right for that. But a cartoon autobiography, that was perfect. Starting a little bit before our birth and going up until the great resting reward.
I avoided doing any images of mental illness for a long time with these drawings because I had two brothers who were schizophrenic. I just found mental illness so hopeless. My drawings, I didn't really want them to be hopeless. I wanted them to be people facing adversity and very difficult circumstances, but there's some sense of hope.
I get a deep sense of consolation whenever I look at this drawing that Edgar did of me, Jim, and our father a few months before he died in 2003. Emotionally, what was the experience of making twins like for you?
Oh, you know what? You're going to make me cry. You know that, don't you? I left the Art Institute of Philadelphia in August. They were closing in December, and I was really afraid they were going to try to screw everybody out of their severance pay. So I wanted to get my severance pay and just get out of there. It was done. It was already dying. And around that time, we were on Facebook, and I wanted a short little project, about 3-5 minutes, to really work on a style. And Jim said, well, I got a story for you. And I said, okay. And then we started email, and I said 3-5 minutes long. And then he sent me the recorded dialogue, and it was 15 minutes long. Oh my God. And then I listened to it, and I had tears in my eyes at the end. I said, oh God, I gotta do this.
Linda, it's amazing, and people were really moved by it.
So glad that that exists. Every kid should see that.
Yup. Well, our pop-up show would not have been possible had it not been for the kindness and encouragement of some other people.
Hello, my name is Trip Denton, and we are at Side Street Gallery, and I am being photographed by John Thornton. And
No, you're not.
I have, or Jim, no, it's John Thornton. I know the difference. I have the honor of having a show in my studio with some of the greatest artists that I know, and I am immensely impressed. This is obviously, without a doubt, the best show that we have ever had by far. And I am not the only person to hold this opinion.
And you've been having shows for 50 some years?
I could bring my son into this, who has seen many of the shows.
How did this compare to your other 150 art openings?
I mean, how does the inauguration compare to a house party?
Better?
Larger, better, more important.
My name's Harvey Weiner.
And you share this space with Trip?
We use this as an exhibit space mainly for ourselves and invite a guest artist to show with us each month. I'm lately working at a really miniature size, and these are mixed collages, painting and digital manipulation, mostly done on a phone app. And I like to show them in large groups because it shows the diversity.
Harvey, they're really nice. People love your small works of art. And I understand there's a Christmas special. They're only
$10 for the 4x6 and $20 for the 5x7s.
My God.
And framed, we go to 40. Once they get out of this area, they jump to 60. And once I figure out how to keep a banana glued to the wall, they're going to jump to 120,000 each.
Before you tisk Harvey, pipe dreams can come true. Edgar, Jim, and I have an art patron, a brilliant doctor from down under named Eric Brecker. He bought work from our show and vows someday to open a JEJ museum. He has even commissioned an official JEJ portrait by the incomparable Fred Danziger. Eric has encouraged us beyond imagining. I speak for all members of JEJ when I say, thank you ever so much, kindly Dr. Eric. In our work, Jim, Edgar, Linda, and I all love to tell stories about people. I am sometimes asked why I don't paint anymore. The answer is simple. Although I loved painting, I love making my movies more. Through filmmaking, I've gotten to meet and help tell the stories of a ton of wonderful artists. Making these artist profile videos is simply the most satisfying work I have ever done.
And thank you, everybody who came to see our show.
Plus Linda.